Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'll just dive into the topic of today straight away.
Germany was a recipient of aid after the Second World War. So was Japan, so was South Korea, so was Malaysia, or even famous Singapore. They all received aid. But there's something special about them, which is they all, without exception, graduated from being aid recipients within 20 years. By the time those 20 years were over, they were actually giving aid to other people. But Africa, 60 years later, Africans are negotiating on a global stage the next form of aid they think they want to be getting. Why is it that we are not able to graduate from aid? In the past, we used to blame colonialists. But today, the threat to African economies or destruction of African economies by Africans, the sabotage of our own economies by Africans is on the rise. And I think that we cannot keep making the same mistakes and expecting different outcomes or better results. We need to get our act together. I think it's possible for Africa to rise, but it won't do so until we get organized and we work differently.
I would have put it differently. I think Africa has failed its people because of bad governance. This is a picture of the ruins of the Museum of Science and Industry in Hiroshima, Japan, soon after the atomic bomb. Yes, I think it is true that the destruction of infrastructure in Japan and Germany and many other countries after the Second World War, and the number of people who died in that war, and the millions who were crippled, and therefore they could not help in the rebuilding, but instead needed help just to survive, was unbelievable. The challenge those nations faced is far greater than the challenge that we in Zimbabwe, for instance, even after 44 years of ZANU-PF, gross mismanagement and rampant corruption, the challenges are nowhere near what countries like Japan faced after the Second World War. And yet, they were able to rebuild and become the big, prosperous nations, economic powerhouses that they are today. A Japanese scholar and writer, Ken Yamamoto, who used to make regular contributions to New Zimbabwe. They had visited Zimbabwe soon after independence, said that the country had the potential to become the South Korea of Africa. His assessment was based on the abundance of mineral wealth and other natural resources and potential. Within decades, 2 decades of Zimbabwe's independence, it was already clear that Zimbabwe was just going to be yet another failed African state. Now, after 44 years, I think we have graduated to become one of the world's obnoxious prima donna failed states, second only to North Korea, but only because, of course, we lack the competence to produce offensive weapons. Where did we go wrong? Yes, having a great abundance of mineral wealth and natural resources would have helped propel us to become an economic boom. But as we can see, that in itself was not guarantee, was no guarantee for economic prosperity. What Zimbabwe lacked in 1980 is visionary leaders and an educated, knowledgeable, and diligent electorate to make sure that the leaders stayed on the narrow and straight path and thus guarantee accountable and competent governance. We had corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical thugs for leaders, an ignorant, naive, and gullible electorate. That is a cocktail for disaster. And no surprise, Zimbabwe is a failed state. It is a common mistake, especially among those who only scratches the surface and never dig deep, and therefore whose understanding of any subject matter is very superficial, to say the least. To think they can have economic prosperity without the prerequisite accountable and competent governance. Accountable and competent governance is the foundation on which a just, prosperous nation at peace with itself and neighbors can be built and thrive. It does not matter how solid and grand the walls and facade of the building may be. Without a solid foundation, it will soon enough collapse. Indeed, the case of Zimbabwe, our bounty of mineral wealth and natural resources have become a curse and not a blessing. The corrupt and incompetent and tyrannical thugs have been looting the nation's wealth and using the ill-gotten wealth to corrupt the state institutions so that they save their the ruling elite's selfish interests at the expense of the common good. It is no exaggeration that after 44 years of enjoying absolute power, ZANU-PF thugs are now addicted to power and would rather burn down the whole country than let anyone else rule it. They will use, and they're using, their amassed wealth to bribe and, if need be, to pay killers so that they remain in power. The sorry state of Zimbabwe's economy has left millions of our people wallowing in abject poverty. I think the truth is this is unsustainable. No society can have a situation where the few filthy rich live in unparalleled luxuries while the millions wallow in hopeless despair. What we have here is an unsustainable social situation. As much as ZANU-PF would use some of its ill-gotten wealth to silence the majority, all we are seeing here is the pressure building up. It's like damming a river. The pressure behind the wall is building up. As the water level increases, it's just a matter of time. That wall will break. And we'll have a tsunami wave 10 stories high, sweeping everything before it. The ZANU-PF dictatorship will be swept aside, just as happened in many other corrupt and tyrannical regimes throughout human history. I think ZANU-PF is deceiving itself. They're thinking that their dictatorship will last forever. It will not. I'll just conclude this talk playing a short clip of Margaret Thatcher saying, maybe in a more concise way, what I've been trying to say in this clip.
Countries are not rich in proportion to their natural resources. If they were, Russia would now be the richest country in the world. Angola would be very rich, and there are many other countries that have a lot of natural resources, but they have not had an enterprise economy to develop those resources. Russia has everything: oil, gas, diamonds, platinum, gold, silver, timber, marvelous soil, but has been poor. She's also, on the second point, got very bad environment, the Aral Sea. I remember going to one communist country in about the 60s and seeing a puddle coming out of a chimney of brown gas, which of course is a nitrous gas. And I was absolutely horrified. I said, well, what are you doing letting that happen? The lungs of the people must be terrible. This is acid. You can't let that go on. Tact has never been my strong point, as you know. And it is the countries that have had the wrong system, which have not created the wealth, have not cared about people. Look at the other side. Japan, no natural resources. Switzerland, no natural resources. Taiwan, no natural resources. It is the political system which enhances the enterprise of the people and gives it a framework within which to operate, which will deal with this poverty.
I think she said it all. We really need to look at not so much at the end result of our failed political system, i.e. the collapsed economy, the lack of education, healthcare, collapsed infrastructure, no clean water, power cuts, etc., etc. That is the end result. The real reason why Africa has been wallowing in poverty is because we do not have functional system of government. All our state institutions, like the judiciary, the banks, the police, the army, etc., have all been captured so that they all serve the dictatorship singular interest of staying in power at all costs. instead of serving the common good, the Commonwealth, the good and prosperity of the nation. That is what we need to look at. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of independent Ghana, had it right. He said, seek you there the political kingdom, and the rest will be given unto you. As long as we do not secure for all our citizens the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country, all our efforts to build our economies for the good of all will come to nothing. Nothing. That is the truth. And I think we need to pay greater attention to it than we are doing now. After 44 years of rigged elections in Zimbabwe, it is disheartening to note that many people out there still have no clue what constitutes free, fair, and credible election in this day and age. As long as ZANU-PF is able to rig elections and stay in power, we will see no meaningful change here. And it must be said, in this case, the opposition has been bought by ZANU-PF so that they failed to implement even one token reform in 24 years, including 5 in the GNU, and they've been participating in flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. And the people themselves have been so naive, ignorant, gullible enough to believe some of the repeated idiotic claims, like I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. CCC is going to win big. A blatant lie. It is unbelievable that many millions, in fact, believed it. And what is more, come 2028, the signs are that people like Chamisa will repeat the same or similar lies, and people will believe it. And they will participate in flawed elections. And thus gives ZANU-PF legitimacy. And so we are back to where we are. As long as we failed to come up with a political system so that we can have accountable and competent leaders, we are not getting out of this mess. Thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope you'll be able to join us at 7 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwe time tonight. Thank you and have a nice day.